In the last 8 years, Republicans have called, and Democrats haven't. Welcome back to Mysterious Things Pod, where we try to explain the real effects of government policies on real Americans. Today, we're talking about voter repression and how a newly proposed bill may just take away the voting rights of 40% of women. This bill has passed the House and is in the Senate. And if you are as angry as I am when you are finished with this pod, I will give you some resources to contact to make your voice known. Also, I will pull an empowerment card at the end for any universal guidance we may need. Now, let's talk about how they are coming for your vote. And it's not just women. Today, we're unraveling a mystery hiding in plain sight, a proposed law that could rewrite the rules of democracy itself. Picture this: a piece of legislation dressed in the cloak of election security, but lurking beneath it, a labyrinth of paperwork, hidden costs, and whispers of a modern-day poll tax. It's called the SAVE Act, and while it claims to protect American voters, critics warn it's a trapdoor, one that could vanish millions of citizens from the voting rolls overnight. Who's at risk? Women fleeing danger, whose survival depends on staying hidden, elders born into a world that never gave them a birth certificate, and marginalized voices already fighting to be heard. But here's the twist. Is this law really about security or silencing? Today, we're diving into the shadows where policy meets real lives, and what we uncover might just keep you up at night. And stay until the end for our card of the day. Part 1. The Basics. First, what's the SAVE Act? Senate Bill S-128, if passed, would require you to have a passport, birth certificate, or similar document to register to vote. Supporters say it'll stop non-citizens from voting, a problem so rare, experts compare it to getting struck by lightning. Critics? They call it a modern-day poll tax. But what is a poll tax?
Between 1889 and 1910, 11 states placed taxes on the right to vote, averaging about $1.50. This was enough to prevent poor whites and African Americans from voting. Many states made poll taxes cumulative. That is, if a person failed to pay the tax in one election, then the tax would be added to the tax charged for the next election.
Part 2. Women in the crosshairs. Let's start with women. Ever changed your name after marriage? 80% of women do. Now imagine your driver's license says Sarah Smith, but your birth certificate says Sarah Johnson. Under the SAVE Act, that mismatch will block you from voting unless you spend hours and cash, as the Act says, to change your birth certificate. But there's a catch. You cannot simply change your birth certificate to reflect your married name. To legally change the name on your birth certificate, you need to obtain a court order and follow the specific procedures in your state, as a birth certificate is considered a historical record of your birth details and cannot be altered without a legal process. The result? Those women just don't vote. And it gets worse for survivors of domestic violence. Many flee abusive partners and legally change their names to stay hidden. Updating IDs? That risks exposing their new identities. One survivor I spoke to, Amanda, said, "Choosing between safety and voting isn't a choice anyone should make." The result, she just wouldn't vote. Then there's the cost. A passport runs $130. A birth certificate? $15–30. For single moms working 2 jobs, that's groceries or gas money. In Texas, strict voter ID laws already reduced women's turnout by 4%. The SAVE Act could deepen that gap. Food versus voting? The result is she chooses feeding her kids, and so she doesn't vote. Part 3. The ripple effect. But it's not just women. Let's talk about communities of color. Take Black voters in the Jim Crow South, many born at home without birth certificates. Black and Indigenous women are 2 to 3 times more likely to lack access to birth certificates due to historic underregistration in hospitals. One man, Joseph, 78, told me, "I voted for 50 years. Now they're asking for a document I never had." Under the SAVE Act, he'd need to petition a court, which costs time and money he doesn't have. The result is that he just won't be allowed to vote. Transgender voters? Over 40% lack IDs that match their gender. Updating those often means court orders or medical letters. Presenting a mismatched ID at the polls? That's not just embarrassing, it's dangerous. To update IDs with their gender, many states require court orders or medical proof. But presenting mismatched IDs at the polls risks harassment or violence. The SAVE Act could silence an already marginalized group. Again, the result is that they just don't vote. And let's not forget rural voters. In Wyoming, some drive 100 miles to reach a DMV. For the elderly or disabled, that's a barrier as steep as any wall. If they get turned away, do you think they will make the 100-mile round trip back? The result will be that once turned away, they just won't vote. Even if you've got your documents in order, the SAVE Act could still bite you. Think DMV lines doubling, or being purged from voter rolls because of a typo. Kansas tried a similar law in 2013, blocked 30,000 voters. It cost taxpayers $1.2 million and found 0 cases of fraud. Kansas courts killed it, calling it discriminatory. Sound familiar? Part 5. The Other Side. Now let's air the supporters' view. GOP Senator John Carter, a co-sponsor, argues, even one illegal vote undermines trust. This is about fairness. And sure, in theory, proving citizenship sounds reasonable. But here's the rub. 11% of Americans, 21 million people, don't have a passport or birth certificate handy. Is fairness only for those who can afford it? Part 6. Solutions. So what's the fix? Automatic voter registration for starters. Georgia lets low-income voters waive ID fees, why not everywhere? And place mobile DMV and voting units in rural towns. Most importantly, educate voters. Many don't know their rights, and confusion is the real enemy of democracy. Here's the bottom line. The SAVE Act isn't just about citizenship. It's about who we prioritize in our democracy. Should voting hinge on how much time or money you have? Or should it be as simple as, are you a citizen? As of today, February 9, 2025, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, SAVE Act S-128, has not been enacted into law. While this bill passed the U.S. House of Representatives on July 10, 2024, with a vote of 221 to 198, it has not advanced through the Senate or received presidential approval. Efforts to include the SAVE Act in a continuing resolution in September 2024 failed, but it remains a priority for House Republican leadership, meaning additional attempts to pass it could occur during the current Congress. So if you think this is an unreasonable bill and want to turn your anger into action, here's some advice from a high-level staffer for a senator. The best thing you can do to be heard and get your congressperson to pay attention is to have face-to-face time. If they have town halls, go to them. Go to their local offices. If you're in D.C., try to find a way to go to an event of theirs. Go to the mobile offices that their staff hold periodically. All these times are located on each congressperson's website. When you go, ask questions, a lot of them, and push for answers. The louder and more vocal and present you can be at those, the better. But those in-person events don't happen every day. So the absolute most important thing that people should be doing every day is calling. Download the app 5 Calls to contact your legislators. Use it every day. Calls are what all the Congress people pay attention to. Every single day, the senior staff and the senator get a report of the 3 most called about topics for that day at each of their offices, in D.C. and local offices, and exactly how many people said what about each of those topics. They're also sorted by zip code and area code. She said that Republican callers generally outnumber Democrat callers 4-1, and when it's a particular issue that single-issue voters pay attention to, like gun control or Planned Parenthood funding, etc., it's often closer to 11-1, and that's recently pushed Republican congressmen on the fence to vote with the Republicans. In the last 8 years, Republicans have called, and Democrats haven't. Right here. And it is empower your thoughts and your dreams. We are all creative and blessed with an imagination. Empower your thoughts and dreams to come true and make them real. Create. I think a good message for this. As always, stay curious, stay critical, and don't let paperwork silence your voice. If you would like to read the text of the SAVE Act, I will post the link in the description. And hit thumbs up, subscribe, and share this with every woman you know. Also, please come back. You won't want to miss our next episode on gerrymandering.